Asian Americans' experience is very important for our whole country as a nation. And so our next speaker is actually someone who on our Make Us Visible website has been posting a lot of these factoids. Very happy that he's here, Ken Hong. He's a parent and an advocate, and I'm very happy to introduce him to you.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning. I'm Ken Hong. I'm a parent with Make Us Visible, Pennsylvania. My wife and I have lived in Chester County with our 3 teenage boys for the past 4 years. I am a 4th generation Chinese American. And even though my family has been here since 1888, my children and I are often looked on as foreigners. How many more generations, how many more decades will it be until my family feels like we belong? But I first became involved with Make Us Visible after I saw that many of my fellow Asian Americans did not even know about the struggles and context of our own history in America. We may have learned about the Chinese Exclusion Act in school, but we are not taught about what it was really like to live for generations of families like mine through the exclusion era. An era that is in the living memory of people like my mother. We do not learn about the Page Act of 1875, which in combination with a succession of increasingly harsh exclusion laws forced men like my grandfathers and my great-grandfathers to travel back and forth to China just to be married and to have a family. One of my great-grandfathers spent almost his entire life, adult life, in the United States. And over the course of those 44 years, not a single day, not one, was spent with his wife, who was barred from entering this country. Instead, my great-grandmother had to stay in China, raising their 2 boys as a single mother, only to see them leave home as teenagers to join their father in the United States. We do not learn about the Angel Island immigration station in San Francisco Bay, where Asian men, women, and children were often caged for months before being admitted to the U.S. or more likely deported. We do not learn about how Chinatowns, such great tourist attractions today, were the outgrowth of exclusionary zoning laws, sundown towns, redlining, and racial covenants. Not to mention the threats and real acts of violence. In addition to all of that, we need to learn about the Asian American and Pacific Islander heroes like Wong Kim Ark, Yik Lee, and Fred Korematsu, fought for the rights of all Americans.
Our important rich culture. Next, I'd like to introduce Gabrielle Janowski. She's a youth mentor and an advocate and an ally, and she's helped our movement so much. I would rather her speak from her own voice all the wonderful things and her experience so far.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Janowski, and I am an ally of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. I was born and raised in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania, to a family of Ukrainian immigrants. In Huntington Valley, I attended public school from 1st to 12th grade alongside many Asian American peers. As early as middle school age, I listened to the experiences of my Asian American friends and classmates as they shared stories of being stereotyped and othered. Our history textbooks did not mitigate these experiences, as the only Asian American stories we learned were the Chinese Exclusion Act and Japanese internment camps. Asian American contributions are still missing from these textbooks. I listened to my Asian American friends throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Their stories still included being stereotyped and othered, but became increasingly urgent as anti-Asian hate skyrockets. My friends fear for their safety. They fear for the protection of their younger siblings, their parents, and their elderly family members. The persistence of othering and the increasing need for public safety measures made it clear that I needed to speak up to support my Asian American neighbors. They need to be seen, heard, and valued. Education serves as a solution to combating anti-Asian bullying and hate. By implementing an inclusive curriculum, we can protect future generations of Asian American students. Students deserve an education that reflects the diversity of our state and our country. Asian American students deserve to see themselves in their textbooks. A complete and inclusive education prepares all students for a diverse and globalized society. Through education, our students will become culturally proficient and empathetic adults. These tools will allow them to succeed in their personal and professional lives. We can build relationships on mutual understanding and respect with education. By including Asian American histories and civic contributions in our classroom, all students can recognize how the Asian American community helped build what is now the United States of America. As an advocate with Make Us Visible PA, I learned about Asian Americans' historical contributions. Recently, I learned about the 1898 Supreme Court case, United States versus Wong Kim Ark. Wong Kim Ark, born in San Francisco, was the son of 2 Chinese immigrants. Because of his determination and bravery, all people born in the United States receive birthright citizenship. As a daughter of immigrants, I am a United States citizen because of Wong Kim Ark. His contribution impacts my life and the lives of others each day, and there are still so many more stories to learn. Asian American history is American history, and it is time that our K-12 curriculum depicts our complete history. Thank you.
For us to understand and deem this as important, individual stories really matter. My brother just got married last week. He's 30 years old. Some of his groomsmen decided to give a speech and stand up at his wedding. There's stories that some of these stories made it into groomsmen speeches. This is how much it affects our lives, everyday lives. People have to talk about them, talk about how othering brought a group of Asian Americans together in elementary school, and they're forced to be on the same team, but they thought, well, I guess we're cool, and you're cool, and you're cool, and we're going to be friends anyway. So individual stories really, really matter in knowing this, and especially in our education system. So our next speaker, another individual story and a great leader in our movement, Serena H. Nguyen. She did speak about, she spoke someone else's letter earlier. Now it's time for her to have the mic.
Hello again. My name is Serena Ngọc Nguyen. I am a daughter, advocate, and youth mentor. I am the proud daughter of breathtakingly resilient Vietnamese refugees who were forced to escape their childhood homes, leaving everything they loved and knew behind amidst the horrors of war. My family risked all they had left on a chance in the form of crowded boats at the mercy of the ocean's currents. But although these traumatic experiences made them who they are today, they are so much more than just this notion of boat people. They are living contributors to American history, living and breathing examples of sacrifice, courage, and resilience. My father has served the US government for over 32 years as an engineer specializing in navigation for our Navy, and has contributed 2 patents and counting, recognized by the US Patent and Trademark Office. My mother has been a healthcare professional for over 30 years. On the front lines in the fight against COVID-19, she continued vaccines and healthcare despite being immunocompromised and despite the rise in anti-Asian sentiment and violence. I am so proud of them for what they do in contributing to this country's history, to Pennsylvania's history. They're American heroes with the right to be recognized just as every other American. But I didn't start to understand this until after I finished school. Growing up, I didn't understand that my surname, Nguyen, was something to be proud of. But to me, my peers and my caretakers It was a strange, unfamiliar, hard to pronounce sound connecting me to a land distant in time and space. It seemed un-American. But it is American because I am American, and so are my parents and my grandparents. Our country and Commonwealth have always been a collection of intertwined histories. This is why I advocate for the inclusion of Asian American and Pacific Islander history in our Commonwealth's curricula. I believe that had I learned as much about the contributions that Asian Americans, like my parents, made to our country, my peers and I would have grown up familiar with names like Mami Tate and Wong Kim Ark, Americans who made vast contributions to our country. Knowing this history would have given me a greater sense of pride and belonging. I'm here today in support of the thoughtful and comprehensive inclusion of AAPI history in PA's K-12 curricula, so that children who look like me can grow up never questioning whether they belong here, because they do. So that children who don't look like me will understand children who do. So that all children will feel safe and protected in their own ways and be better prepared for an ever-increasing diverse country, so that there is less hate in our society and more understanding. I urge you to support the passage of the AAPI History Inclusion Act, House Bill 1917, and make us.
For everyone who made it today, anybody who has a personal story to share about being AAPI in America or being an ally of AAPI in America, you can please step forward and have the mic.
Thank you. I am Dr. Kiran Patil, neurologist from St. Clair Hospital, and immigrated to United States in 2002 to do research and then eventually get into medicine. A similar story as some of my colleagues mentioned here. Not personally me, obviously, but my kids' experience in school, especially in kindergarten, and really heartening stories. I think our culture and tradition believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, world being one big family. And I think once we believe that this hate or whatever discrimination is there will vanish. And we support the bill, House Bill 1917, and we are with you. Thank you. Thank you, Ian.
Education on AAPI history in the schools. I'm tired of seeing my children bullied. I'm tired of being bullied. I'm tired of feeling like a forever foreigner in the United States when I am an American citizen. So this bill, in Heritage Month, in the month of May, or any time throughout the year, we believe this is important. This bill will also commission a study by the State Board of Education to see how school districts in Pennsylvania are teaching AAPI curriculum across the state and ensure our students are receiving robust instruction on AAPI history and social contributions. It seems pretty simple. Again, this is not a mandate, but this is a strong urging and suggestion, because this is how we feel we can combat hate in Pennsylvania and across the United States. I would like to bring up now the co-sponsor of House Bill 1917, Representative Todd Stevens. And Todd, thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you so much, Patty. I'm probably gonna steal that phrase: "Educate to stop the hate." I think that's such a great way to mark why we're here. It is astounding to me the unfortunate rise we've seen in hate crimes directed at the AAPI community, and I think this bill is a terrific opportunity to highlight the contributions that the AAPI community has had here in America. And I want to thank Representative Kim for her leadership in advancing this bill and for inviting me to speak here today. The story of Asian Americans is one filled with resilience, persistence, and self-determination. In my district, there's a monument recognizing just one part of this amazing struggle. Each year we gather at the Korean War Memorial Peace Park to remember the Korean-American alliance that fended off tyranny during the Korean War. This partnership forged a lasting relationship between our two nations that endures still today. And our Korean friends are among the most enthusiastic supporters for American freedom and productivity, and the Korean community in Montgomery County is among the most dedicated and generous in our Commonwealth. But this is just one of the contributions paid by the Asian Americans in building American character, stories that must be told in our classrooms. I want our kids to learn about the Filipinos, who in the 16th century escaped Spanish enslavement, immigrated to North America, and established a settlement in Louisiana in 1763. I want our students to hear about the times during the California Gold Rush in the 1850s, when a wave of Asian immigrants came to the West Coast to toil in the gold mines, factories, and on the Transcontinental Railroad that helped traverse and build America. And even after our leaders subjugated Japanese Americans in internment camps of World War II, our Asian brothers and sisters fought proudly side by side in the battle against Nazism, even as their parents were being stripped of their rights as Americans. Today, the Asian American community continues to provide life-changing efforts in healthcare, science, and technology. In my district during the pandemic, I was honored to partner with a local Asian-owned pharmacy who provide testing and vaccination programs for our nursing homes, our seniors, our families, and our students. They were critical on the front lines in helping us get through the pandemic. And this Asian American-owned pharmacy was my partner throughout that, and I cannot thank them enough or lift them up high enough for their efforts during the pandemic. Asian American and Pacific Islanders are the fastest growing racial group in the United States, and it's our obligation as legislators to make sure that their contributions to the American story are taught in our schools for future generations. I'm happy to join this effort with Representative Kim to get this bill before the whole House for a vote, so that new generations of Americans will learn how our Asian brothers and sisters have built our nation and contributed to our culture. Thank you so much for having me today. It is my honor to introduce Stephanie Sun, the Executive Director of the Governor's Advisory Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, State Representative Todd Stevens, for all your support and effort. And thank you so much, State Representative Patty Ginn, for all your leadership and advocacy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Sun, and I have the privilege to serve as the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Governor's Advisory Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs. Happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Yes, Happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. As Asian Pacific Americans, how happy are we? Every one of you can ask any Asian Pacific Americans around you how happy they are, or whether they're happy, especially in the past 3 years. Then see if you will see smiles or tears in their eyes. Atlanta shooting has passed more than 1 year. People talk, people rallied, people commemorate, but anti-Asian violence, anti-Asian hate cases are not reduced. We should ask ourselves, what is the fundamental solution? 2 days before the anniversary of Atlanta shooting, a 67-year-old Asian lady was called Asian B-word and punched 125 times, stomped 7 more times, and spat out by a stranger on her way home. 67-year-old is the same age as my mother, and I believe it's a similar age as many of your mothers and grandmothers. I do ask you to think about it. What if she were your mother or grandmother? In Philadelphia, An Asian American high school girl was beaten to becoming a victim of ethnic intimidation and aggravated assault when she stepped in to help her 4 fellow Asian younger students as they were being bullied and assaulted on their way home from school on a very crowded public transportation train, and no one else stood up for them. Everyday life, walking to grocery, school, or work is still a life and death battle for Asian Pacific Americans, especially seniors and females. What's wrong with their country? What's wrong with their people? I think you will see both tears and smiles in Asian Pacific Americans' eyes if you tell them you care about them, just like how you care for all our fellow Americans. In this Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, we have so many celebration events across Pennsylvania. Asian Pacific Americans are still celebrating their beautiful heritages and cultures, still welcoming with smiles on their face. Everyone welcoming, still bringing joy and diversity to people and the community at large, and still working so hard every day to contribute to the society that we're living together, even with tears and bleeding wounds in their hearts, but still with smiles on their faces. Holding a candle, flickering in the storm, called heritage, identity, contributions, pride, and being American. Where can our children and young generations find and affirm their heritage, identity, pride, and their community's contributions? How can they find their place in this country when they cannot find themselves in their school's textbooks? Can they only rely on those several times a year, here and there, put together by their parents, those community events put together by their parents as volunteers? What about the children with parents who don't have the capacity to do so? What about the children who live in areas without a big population of their own ethnic groups? Do they have a chance to learn from their school's textbooks together with their classmates? If not, is it fair to the children? If not, is it fair to throw all this education work to the parents who usually are not education professionals? If not, are we, as public servants, together with all government employees and legislators, really fulfilling our duties to responding to the needs of people who we serve? We appreciate calling attention to ensuring all students have access to inclusive education, culturally relevant curriculum and materials. And we applaud bipartisan collaboration to recognize the importance of the history and contributions of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. The Wolf administration support effort to increase inclusive education approaches and has taken several steps towards these goals. It is so essential that students can see themselves represented in school materials and have the opportunity to learn about the various cultures that make up our diversity, our diverse society. The governor supports education that represents the student's body, advances culture competencies, and reduce discrimination. Learning about the range of cultures and identities is also necessary for preparing students for global citizenship. We need to collectively support broad change and improvements in these areas. The Pennsylvania Governor's Advisory Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs strongly supports these goals and continues to work with administration, stakeholders, and communities on the most effective ways to promote addressing these issues. When our children see that they're all absent from the textbooks and classes, Are we teaching our children that they are forever foreigners and exclusive? Education is public recognition. It's our historic records. It's attitude of a country and the state. And it's the root to shape the people, shape the society, and shape the future. Thank you. Now I would like to pass the mic to the pride of our Asian Pacific Americans in Pennsylvania State Senate, Senator Nikhil Saval.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for the truly eloquent and searing speech. I really appreciate it. So, good morning. Again, I'm Nikhil Saval. It's my honor to represent the people and communities of Pennsylvania's first senatorial district, which runs through the heart of Philadelphia. I want to thank my colleague, Representative Patty Kim, for bringing us here together this morning and for leading the charge for the inclusion of curricula throughout our schools that include Asian American and Pacific Islander people contributions and history. Thank you to Representative Todd Stevens for co-sponsoring and for fighting for this adoption in the Pennsylvania House. Thank you to Stephanie Sun. And thank you to Denise Halloran, who will introduce shortly. Thank you to all who are here supporting this legislation and pushing back against the division and hatred that has been sowed in communities across our country and even right here in Pennsylvania. American history, without the inclusion of the contributions, the experiences, and the struggles of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, is only a partial truth. The purpose of HB 1917 is to push against the erasure of Americans by affirming Asian American history as American history, and thus Asian American communities as unequivocally American. Our country has 22 million Asian Americans who trace their roots to more than 20 countries. In our Commonwealth, the number of people who identify as Asian has increased 50% from 2010 to 2020. At the same time, as we've heard, we've seen spikes in hate crimes, which fundamentally tell those whom they are perpetrated against, you are not us. HB 1917 will begin to make visible the experiences of Asian Americans so that all of us can see in each other's experiences our shared hopes, our shared struggles, and our shared joys. It will begin to make visible the full history of Asian American history that in fact stretches beyond the formal beginnings of the United States. Asian American history is, among other things, the history of Chinese immigrants to Spanish colonies, indentured South Asians transported to the Caribbean. It is the history of Japanese agricultural workers in California and Bengali sailors in Harlem and New Orleans. The South Asians who led protests against the British Empire just outside of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. The history of the first Indian American congressman, Dilip Singh San, who took office in the 1950s. All of this well before the history of the 1965 Immigration Act. It is the history of these events, and it is the history of these events in the languages that people interpreted them in and continue to interpret them in Asian languages. Languages spoken of in such profusion here. Languages written in a myriad of scripts across the storefronts that mark our vibrant, diverse commercial corridors in cities across the Commonwealth. Languages so common here that we must also consider them American languages. This is important for all of Pennsylvania, and it is important for my district, the 1st Senate District, which has the distinction of being one of the most racially, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically diverse districts in the Commonwealth. I look forward to the day when children growing up in my district and throughout our state can recognize themselves in the lessons that are taught. I have the strange distinction of being just one of only a few Asian Americans to serve in our Commonwealth's General Assembly and the first and only legislator of South Asian descent. As proud as I am for this distinction, it is also a lonely position. That loneliness is ameliorated not just by the presence of colleagues with diverse backgrounds, but when colleagues of all backgrounds take actions to ensure that the diversity of our Commonwealth is reflected in its institutions, especially its institutions of learning. And so I applaud Representative Kim for her initiative to ensure that future generations of Asian Americans can understand their work as part of a community that is expansive and longstanding. I hope this for my two sons as well. That's why I'm proud to announce that I'll be introducing a version of this legislation in the Senate with my colleague, Senator Maria Collette of Montgomery County, and I look forward to working with all my colleagues in the Senate and the House to pass this legislation and foster deeper understanding of our country and everyone who has been part of its history. When we can recognize in each other our shared struggles, we can stand in solidarity. I'm proud of the work for Pennsylvania to join the movement of states that understand an injury to one of us is an injury to all of us. And I look forward to fostering solidarity in every county and in every community. Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to bring on Denise Halpern.
Good morning, everyone. I want to first thank Representative Kim. I am Representative Todd Stevens, Stephanie Sun from the Governor's Office for being with us, and of course, Nikhil Sabal. Thank you so much for being here with us today in support of House Bill 1917 to include Asian American and Pacific Islander history into our Commonwealth's K-12 curriculum. My name is Jihyun Denise Hallenbrand. I'm a proud parent of two biracial children, my daughter and my son. When COVID shut down our schools and violence against Asian Americans increased across Pennsylvania, I felt fearful and helpless. I was scared for my children to go to school. I was scared for my parents to go outside. I was scared to even go to the grocery stores myself. I needed to find ways to protect my kids, my parents, and myself. During the shutdown, I spoke with other parents, students, and neighbors in our community. We all fear for our safety, and we try to seek out a solution that would keep us safe. When the Atlanta shootings happened and 6 women who looked like me gunned down in cold blood, it shocked my family. I watched my children change overnight and in the few days that followed. They went from being outgoing, active teens and to becoming more withdrawn, more frustrated, and more angry. They were feeling the same helplessness and the hopelessness that we were all feeling. I had to take action so that they did not have to. Make Us Visible PA is how we came together when searching for a lasting, long-term solution. We're a grassroots coalition made of students, parents, teachers, and community members advocating for incorporation of Asian American and Pacific Islander history into our K-12 curriculum. Make Us Visible PA is looking to help folks to see people like my daughter and my son, less of a foreigner and more of as a neighbor. When I joined Make Us Visible Community, I learned about Wong Kim Ark, an Asian American who fought for birthright citizenship in 1898. I learned how AAPI fought bravely alongside of other American soldiers in World War II, with one regiment, the 442nd Infantry, among the most decorated in U.S. history. There are many, many AAPI contributions currently not being taught in our country. We are looking to integrate these contributions as part of American history because Asian American history is American history. The passing of House Bill 1917 is so important to me, my family, and my community because it is the one way we can establish a long-term preventative measures against future Asian American bullying and violence. It is also a way we can build a greater understanding and acceptance of the civic contributions that AAPIs have made in our Commonwealth and our country. I urge lawmakers from across our great Commonwealth to come together in bipartisan support for this bill and to prioritize its passage this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. She was our last speaker. That concludes our press conference. We sincerely thank everyone for joining us. We will be available for one-on-one interviews if you like, and we'll be sticking around. All right? Thank you so much, everyone. Have a